Travis and Christie's 16th wedding anniversary was just a few days away, and every hour brought them closer to this significant milestone. But that's when everything happened the way it happened. Some time later, looking back on the events that turned their lives upside down, Travis remembered one simple, almost banal saying, "Be careful what you wish for." Words that had previously seemed like just a nice expression to him now sounded like a stern warning that he may have underestimated. Never before had this phrase seemed so true to him. Travis and Christy met in their youth, at a time when life was just beginning to take on certainty. Their meeting was organized by her colleagues. For some reason, Christy's friends decided that these two would be ideal for each other. Both were free, both worked in the same company, and they were united by a similar craving for humor and simplicity in relationships. Although Travis was initially skeptical about the idea of such a meeting, he agreed out of curiosity. When he first saw Christy, a bright and confident girl with an infectious laugh and warmth in her eyes, it became clear to him that the evening had not been in vain. Now, 16 years later, their lives were rich and full. The house, built on common dreams, became a cozy nest for their family. They had several children who became the center of their universe, adding bustle, joy, and a little chaos to everyday life. However, Travis, despite the years that had passed since he first met Christy, still found her unusually attractive. At 39, she looked as sexy as the night they met. Her eyes still sparkled, reflecting inner strength and confidence, and her smile could warm even the coldest day. Travis increasingly thought about how lucky he was to meet Christy, a woman who not only became his wife, but also a companion who understood and supported him in everything. Their relationship was not perfect, but that was where its real value lay. They had been through a lot together and had even more to come. But right now, on the threshold of their 16th anniversary, Travis could not imagine that fate was preparing a new twist for them that would change everything. Thanks to a successful combination of genetics and a commitment to a healthy lifestyle, Christy was always in excellent physical shape, which invariably attracted admiring glances. Her slender figure, with harmonious proportions and smooth lines, seemed to be created in order to attract attention. With a height of 170 centimeters and a weight of just over 57 kilograms, she looked elegant, but at the same time strong, like the embodiment of natural feminine beauty. One of her most noticeable physical assets were her breasts, a graceful 34D size, which always delighted Travis. No matter how much time had passed since they met, every time his eyes fell on her, he felt the same excitement as in the early days of their relationship. Christy was never arrogant or overly flirtatious, but her figure and, especially, her breasts always gave her extra confidence. She knew how to present herself without going overboard. Her style was simple and elegant. She favored tight t-shirts that showed off her curves, or casual shirts that fit her in a way that turned even the most mundane outfit into something seductive. It was a natural magnetism that did not require excessive effort. She knew how to look impressive without making any visible effort, and this quality made her even more attractive. Travis had watched her all these years with admiration and secret pride. He was pleased to see other men sneaking glances at her on the street or at parties. They may have tried to hide their admiration, but it was obvious to Travis, and instead of jealousy, he felt satisfaction. These moments raised his self-esteem as if confirming, "Yes, this is my wife, and she is beautiful." He was proud that next to him was a woman who not only retained her external attractiveness, but also skillfully emphasized it over the years. Her beauty was never just a superficial quality for him. He appreciated her care for herself, but even more her inner light and confidence, which was always reflected in her posture, movements, and smile. For Travis, Christie's beauty was part of their shared history, their love, which only grew stronger over the years. And this pride in her beauty did not fade away, but, on the contrary, became brighter, strengthening his feelings and respect for her. Although they had their ups and downs in their sex life, it was clear that the timing and intensity of the highs outweighed the lows. At certain points in their marriage, some catalyst sparked new energy and excitement in their love life, and they fueled it for weeks, enjoying the best sex of their marriage. In recent years, Many of these catalysts have come from Travis sharing his intimate fantasies, and to her credit, Christy has almost always satisfied them. These fantasies became a huge incentive to maintain their sex life at a satisfactory level for both. There was only one fantasy she didn't fulfill for Travis, and he understood her doubts. Even he himself found it difficult to understand why he fantasized about her being with another man. And it wasn't just about her being with another man. In many of Travis' fantasies, he was forced to watch it happen. He was fully aware of how absurd it sounded when he finally worked up the courage a few months ago to share this awkward confession. Travis remembered that night clearly. It was a normal Friday night, and after they had drunk almost 2 bottles of wine, he managed to carefully broach the subject. During a particularly emotional moment that night, Christy was by Travis' side, and the two formed a deep connection. She looked at him, noticing the look of complete pleasure on his face, and asked him with a smile what he was thinking. It was a question she often asked in moments like this, trying to deepen their communication, and sometimes Travis would share a fantasy or thought that was on his mind, perhaps imagining her in moments of joy or imagining their adventures together. Their conversations often increased their emotional closeness and deepened their relationship. But that night, perhaps due to a combination of the wine he drank and the atmosphere of the moment, Travis replied that he imagined her experiencing strong emotions in a new situation. This in itself was not unusual. But after Christie asked to know more, he finally revealed. With another person, he said, completely immersed in the moment. What? She asked, surprised and puzzled. Travis immediately regretted his words, but when Christy continued to act as if she was trying to get an answer from him, he finally decided to share the fantasy that he had been keeping secret until that moment. Travis, after a short pause, gathered his courage and spoke. He began carefully, avoiding harsh words, but still frankly. He admitted that he often imagines her with another man while he watches from the sidelines. His voice was quiet but confident, although he clearly felt vulnerable revealing this part of his fantasies. Christy listened attentively without interrupting. Her face showed a mixture of surprise and confusion, but there was no condemnation or anger in it. She carefully placed the cup on the table so she could concentrate fully on his words. Her eyebrows raised slightly, and she tilted her head to the side, as if she was trying to see his point of view from different angles. "Why do you want this?" she asked finally, her voice sounding soft, almost cautious. It was not a cry, not an accusation, but a sincere question. She tried to understand him, even if the thought itself seemed strange to her. Travis hesitated, trying to find the words to explain what motivates him and what it means to him. He talked about how this enhances his perception of her beauty and uniqueness, how it causes a storm of emotions that he did not even expect from himself. Christy nodded thoughtfully, not immediately giving free rein to her thoughts. Then came another question. "But won't you be jealous?" She frowned slightly, her tone sounding like she was really trying to figure out his feelings. Travis answered honestly, admitting that such thoughts were accompanied by a complex mixture of jealousy and arousal, that his own feelings sometimes surprised him. "Won't this ruin our marriage?" Christy continued. Her voice was still calm, but there was anxiety in it. She wasn't cold or distant. On the contrary, her questions reflected her concern, an attempt to understand whether such a revelation would break the bond they had built over the years. Travis noticed how her hands, which were lying on her knees, tensed slightly. She did not reject him, but in her gaze there was an internal dialogue. Should she perceive this as a threat to their relationship or as another facet that makes their marriage unique? The silence between their remarks did not seem hostile. It was more of a time for reflection, to understand how step by step they would move in this conversation. And although Christy seemed puzzled, Travis felt her desire to remain on his side, despite the fact that he opened up to her a part of his soul that had previously been hidden. All of Travis' answers tried to calm her down, and perhaps, serendipitously, warm her up to the idea. He read his wife well, however, and while she didn't call him crazy or say she was disgusted by the idea, she certainly didn't give any indication that she was interested. Instead, they both simply let the discussion pass. Neither of them brought up the topic for several more weeks, and Travis wasn't surprised. Really, how many men want to see their wife having sex with another man while they are forced to watch? At least that's what he was sure she thought. However, Travis is quite familiar with this topic, having long been researching it through watching online videos. He knew he wasn't that unique. There were definitely other men into this, at least according to what he had read and seen online. But eventually the topic came up again, and eventually they became more comfortable discussing Travis' interest. From Christie's point of view, it was a firm no at first, but over the course of a few weeks, he felt she might become a little interested in it too. Or perhaps she was just playing very well in his favor. Several times he even tried to include this topic in their conversations, finding the moment to convince herself that she might be interested in this, perhaps through the power of association. One day, Travis whispered something about whether she was thinking about someone else who had strong feelings for her. She soon reacted emotionally, and he thought that perhaps she was actually on board with the idea. On one occasion, she responded with a resounding yes to his question, and Travis convinced himself that it was a positive sign. Afterwards, they sat together for a while before Christie started asking a lot of questions, such as, "Who will it be? Where will we do it? And of course, are you sure this won't bother you? This could affect our marriage." All of these questions were important, and Travis spent weeks coming up with answers that he believed would reassure her. He assured her that this was something he had thought about for a long time and really wanted, that it could bring them closer, it wouldn't change how much he loved her, and could take their relationship to the next level, and so on. The truth was that although he had been thinking about it non-stop for so long, thinking of ways to convince his wife, he had started to feel a little apprehensive lately. It still excited him to the point of insanity. But the irony was that on the rare occasions when she satisfied him with dirty talk about it, he wondered if he might have doubts if it ever happened. But he convinced himself that it didn't matter. There was no way she would actually make it happen, no matter how hard he tried to convince her. So he pushed those fears aside, deciding to simply focus and enjoy the intense excitement that the very idea brought him. Less than 2 weeks later, Travis and Christie went on a long-planned weekend getaway. Things were busy at home and at work, and they were looking forward to a break from reality. The sex had been intense lately, and Travis was hoping to take advantage of this moment for more intimate and private time away from the kids. There was a lot of wine, and, as had happened so often over the past few weeks, the topic of Travis' fantasy came up again. This time, Travis noticed that Christie was asking more specific details, especially who it would be with. Travis suggested that it would be better to take a stranger to avoid the chance of meeting them again or them telling someone they might know in their small town. Christie understood the argument for the stranger, but countered that they could not be sure that the stranger would be safe, both physically and knowing the person's sexual history. She made a compelling argument, and Travis found himself torn between overcoming her doubts. After a few moments of silence, Christie spoke up. "What about Alec?" This took Travis completely by surprise. For several seconds, he did not know how to answer. Alec was Travis's best friend. Although due to the distance they didn't see each other as often as before, they were still very close and had a special connection since they were roommates in their 20s. Alec was 6 years younger than Travis, making him only a year younger than Christie. Despite this age difference, he always had a youthful energy that gave him a special charisma. Tall, with a toned, athletic figure that showed he took care of himself, Alec was an eye-catcher with his confidence. His thick dark hair, slightly curly at the ends, and the piercing gaze of deep brown eyes completed the image of a man from whom it was difficult to look away. Alec was the epitome of an extrovert, a man who easily got along with anyone from a waiter in a cafe to a business partner at an important meeting. His manner of communication, lively and sincere, created the impression that everyone who spoke to him was an old friend. People often said that having Alec around made them feel special because he could listen and make jokes that would immediately diffuse any tense situation. However, this natural charm also had a downside. His ease of communication was sometimes perceived as superficiality, especially by those who knew him better. Behind the bright smile was a man who could not always cope with deep personal difficulties. This partly explained his difficult personal life. Alec was married twice, and both marriages were far from ideal. His first marriage ended in a painful divorce after years of trying to save a relationship that he said was doomed from the start. His second marriage didn't go much better. Alec often shared his experiences with Travis. He complained that despite his best efforts, something always went wrong in his marriage. His charm, which at first seemed irresistible to his spouses, eventually gave way to expectations that he simply could not or did not want to meet. Despite this, Alec did not lose his cheerfulness and charm. He was always ready to support a friend or have fun if needed. This made him the ideal companion in friendship, a man who never let you down, even if his own life was less than ideal. For Travis, Alec remained something of a little brother, someone who he supported, but who could always inspire him with his energy and ability to find joy even in difficult situations. And for Christy, Alec was an acquaintance whom she saw infrequently, but always considered a pleasant and friendly person. Her unexpected proposal to him now took on new weight, causing Travis to look at their friend from a completely different angle. Travis was shocked to hear Christie's proposal. Her words echoed in his head, each time adding to the surprise of what she had just said. He felt something inside him tighten sharply, as if an invisible hand was pushing the feeling of jealousy to the surface. Alec's name. Why him? Travis couldn't help but think that the name hadn't come to her by accident. Maybe Christie had been considering this option for some time, while he, immersed in his fantasies, did not even suspect it. However, he did not want to destroy the fragile connection that arose between them at that moment, a connection built on frankness and an attempt to understand each other. Travis suppressed the first, instinctive urge to ask a direct question and instead tried to maintain an apparent calm. "Is it true, Alec?" he said, trying to keep his voice even, without the telltale notes of surprise or doubt. Christie smiled slightly, as if expecting his reaction. Her gaze remained calm, although Travis caught a shadow of uncertainty in her eyes, as if she herself was not entirely sure of the correctness of her proposal. "Of course I think so," she replied. Her voice was even, but a little hasty, like that of a person who prepares an excuse for her choice in advance. "He's someone we already know, so he seems safer. We know he's been married for a long time, so he likely hasn't had many recent sexual partners. It alleviates some of the worries about getting sick or something like that." She paused, looking away as if contemplating her words, and then added with a slight hint of nonchalance, "And I'm sure he would be honest and open if there were any doubts." Christie seemed so logical, so confident in her arguments, that Travis felt momentarily embarrassed by his own jealousy. However, her next sentence added a new level of reflection. "Or do you think that this will make your friendship too strange later?" Her tone was so natural that it could seem as if this was a normal conversation over evening wine, and not a discussion of such a sensitive topic. But Travis knew his wife well enough to understand that behind her words there was a real question to which she wanted an honest answer. He thought, trying to put his thoughts in order. His mind was tossed between rationality and emotion. On the one hand, her arguments sounded reasonable. Alec was a close friend, a person he trusted. On the other hand, the very thought of such a scenario made him feel vulnerable. No, probably not. I think that's an option," he finally answered slowly, each word as if pulled from the depths of his mind. Travis felt Christie looking at him intently. He looked at her and noticed how her eyes sparkled slightly as she raised her glass and took another sip of wine. In her gestures and facial expression, there was something more than just calmness. It was a spark, a slight mixture of interest, cheekiness, and perhaps a little relief that the conversation had not reached a dead end. There was a short pause in the room, filled with tense silence, which they both felt, but no one was in a hurry to break. Travis allowed himself to lean back on the sofa, watching as Christie carefully placed the glass on the table and made herself more comfortable. Their gazes met, and he saw something new in her eyes that made his heart beat a little faster. "Do you think he'll agree?" she asked, trying not to sound too concerned. Well, I'm sure he'll agree. I mean, look at you. It was true. Travis was sure that all of his friends had at least once thought about his wife in some lewd way. It's something to think about, he continued, deciding it was best to end the conversation now so he could think about it more clearly later. As their night continued, Travis and Christy relaxed on the bed of the small one-room cottage they had rented, drinking and talking while the TV flickered in the background. They flirted a little and Travis began to avoid the topic of his long-awaited fantasy. By the time they finished the second bottle of wine, Christy was clearly feeling the effects of the alcohol. Travis noticed that her words were starting to slow down a bit, and she was becoming more and more playful. Their mutual attraction intensified, and they came closer and closer to the border that they had been discussing all evening. Travis knew that wine affected Christie's mood. She became more relaxed, her behavior more provocative. She looked at him with a challenge in her eyes, as if checking how ready he was to go further. At some point, she pulled away and, looking into his eyes, said, "You should write to Alec and see what he says." Travis's heart sank for a moment. This means that her interest in this idea was not just a game after all. "Aha," he replied, trying to delay things a little. "Maybe a little later." He hoped that the conversation on this topic could be postponed. However, Christy did not insist too much. She said that she needed to go to the toilet, and when she returned, she asked the same question again. "Have you already texted him?" "No, not yet," he answered calmly. "Let's just think about it a little first, and then I'll contact him." Christy seemed thoughtful for a moment, and Travis noticed a slight hint of disappointment on her face. But she let the topic go, returning to their conversation. As she approached Travis again, he smelled the wine on her breath and felt her passionate touch. This was the level of emotional high that Christy achieved when she was a little drunk. Their interactions became more intense and the tension between them increased. Her behavior became even more confident and open, as if she was testing Travis's strength, checking how much he was ready to go to extremes. Christy looked at him with a provocative smile that seemed to say, "Go ahead, do your best." Travis felt that Christy's emotions were at their peak, and he himself was very caught up in the situation. This mixture of jealousy, passion, and talk about possible changes in their relationship added tension and drama to their evening. Travis wasn't sure how serious Christy was about bringing their discussion to life, but her eagerness to pursue the topic and her playful demeanor made it clear that she was truly interested. She was looking for new sensations, which frightened and at the same time fascinated Travis. Although there were no specific actions between them, everything that happened left an imprint on their relationship and made them wonder what boundaries they were willing to cross for each other. Over the next few weeks, Travis and Christy had sex 4 or 5 times a week, and most of those sessions were intense. There was nothing like their time at the cottage, and there was no mention of Alec or any other man. But it was still incredibly exciting, as if everything was new for both. Travis kept imagining his wife with another man, but it was hard for him not to see his friend's face every time. It was almost 2 months after their holiday at the cottage before Alec's name came up again. It was Friday night, and the kids had finally gone to bed. Christy poured them each a glass of wine, and they retired to the hot tub on the back deck. They sat looking at the stars, mostly enjoying the silence and tranquility of the evening. Christy slid into Travis' lap and rested her head on his shoulder, looking up at the night sky. He hugged her waist and enjoyed the smell of her hair. He took a deep breath. Life is good. "Hey, haven't you talked to Alec in a while?" Christy broke the silence. Travis's heart leaped, but he forced himself to remain calm and casual. "No more than a week," he replied. "Why?" "I just wanted to know when he was coming to town again. I was hoping that maybe he could bring back a few bottles of the wine we had when we visited him last year." It wasn't unusual for Alec to stop in for a visit when he was in town for work, usually hoping to play a few rounds of golf and catch up. Travis knew what kind of wine she was talking about. Their visit to Alec's last year included a local wine tour, and Christy found a new favorite Cabernet that wasn't sold near them. They brought home 4 bottles, but they ran out long ago. Travis was suspicious, but wondered if he was being paranoid. She hadn't mentioned Alec since they were at the cottage a few weeks ago, and he was starting to think that Christy was just trying to help play out his fantasy with dirty talk. "Not sure, haven't talked to him lately," Travis replied calmly. "You should reach out and find out. You could play golf and he could crash at our place for the night," she said so casually, without any hint that she had any intentions related to what we talked about during their vacation. "Maybe," Travis replied, and she let the subject pass. A little over a week later, Travis actually received a text from Alec. He'll be in town for a baseball tournament for the team he coaches and wanted to see if Travis wanted to meet for drinks. The timing took him by surprise, but he always looked forward to opportunities like this to spend time together. "Sure, sounds great," Travis replied. "Where are you staying?" "The team has booked rooms at the Garrison Inn," he replied. Travis always offered him a place to stay when he came to town, but this time he was hesitant, remembering Christie's mention of his friend during sex at the cottage a few weeks ago. But he knew that it would be rude not to offer it. After a few seconds of internal debate, he replied, "Don't be stupid, you'll spend the night with us." Then, "By the way, Christie asked you to bring her some bottles of Cabernet that we had the last time we visited." "No problem," he replied. "I'll come by after our last game on Saturday. See you then." For some reason, Travis waited 2 days before telling Christie that Alec was coming. "That's great," she replied. "I asked him to bring your wine," he said, putting his arm around her waist. He kissed her cheek before continuing to her neck. "What wine?" she asked. Travis pulled away and kept her at a distance, a confused look on his face. "The wine you wanted him to bring if he was in town," Travis reminded him. "Oh, right. Yes, of course, that would be great. Thank you, dear." How could she have already forgotten? He now suspected that her offer to bring wine if he was in town was just an excuse to see him. But did she seriously intend for something to happen between her and Alec? Travis told himself that this seemed very unlikely. He knew his wife. He had been encouraging her for the past few months, or perhaps pressuring her into how he thought he would fulfill his fantasy, and she was simply trying to satisfy his desires through frank conversations. However, he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in his stomach. Maybe he should just discuss this with Christie and make sure they understood each other. Yes, he was still very aroused by the thought of her with another man. At least that's what he thought. And he loved her dirty talk about it in the bedroom. But his friend was out of range. He decided to talk to her tonight after the kids went to bed. When Travis returned home from an unexpectedly late day at work, he was greeted by his sister, Christy. Christy went out with friends for the evening and asked her sister to watch the kids until Travis got home. Travis thanked her for looking after her and walked her to the door. "See you Saturday," she said cheerfully, turning to leave. "Eh?" Travis replied, confused. "Christy asked me to leave the kids for a sleepover on Saturday. She said you have plans." Seeing the blank look on Travis's face, she suddenly covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide. "Oh no," she said. "Please tell me I didn't just ruin some surprise or something." "No, no, of course not. Yes, we have plans. I just forgot," Travis assured her. "Thank you again. See you on Saturday," he said before closing the door behind her. It wasn't unusual for them to find a babysitter if they had guests. So why did things seem different this time? Travis tried to wait for Christy, but eventually went to bed and soon fell asleep. The next morning was Friday, and he woke up to the sound of his wife coming downstairs getting the kids ready for school. After the shower, he went down to the kitchen. Christy stood leaning on the tabletop, wearing a pair of cotton pajamas and a tight tank top. She looked great. Travis crossed the room and placed his hands on her hips, lifting her onto the countertop. Christy hugged his neck tightly, and they kissed for a few seconds. "I need to get to the office for a meeting with a client. Can we continue when I get home?" We'll see," she said teasingly. That night they made love. Travis thought about bringing up the whole fantasy and situation with Alec, but the timing didn't seem right. He thought it best to wait until tomorrow, maybe after Christy's sister picked up the kids. But the next day, when it was just him and Christy at home, he still couldn't bring up the subject. The problem was, now that he'd had time to think about it, he was starting to feel a little stupid for even bothering about it. It seemed unlikely that his wife had any thoughts of being with his best friend. And of course, not without preliminary discussion. Now he was sure that it was all just playful role-playing, and he thought how lucky he was that she agreed to perform this for him. And anyway, what if she fantasized about it? After his repeated attempts to convince her, isn't he responsible for her starting to think about something like this? But even if she thought about how it could be, it was just a fantasy, it was harmless enough. The couple spent the afternoon cleaning the house and Travis ran a few errands. When they finished, they sat on the back deck and opened their first bottle of wine, chatting about small things and enjoying the quiet time without the kids. As soon as they finished the bottle, Travis' phone notified him of a new message. "See you in an hour," Alec wrote. Travis looked at his watch and was surprised that it was already 5:30 p.m. Christy stood up and collected the empty bottle and her glass. "Wow, you can already feel the effect of the wine," she said with a smile. "I think I better take my time." She then told Travis that she was going to take a shower before Alec arrived. Travis sat back in his chair, enjoying the warm sun on his face. He felt a strange sensation of excitement. He always looked forward to the evening to spend with his best friend, but somehow this felt different, perhaps with a hint of nervousness. He took one last sip of wine and stood up to go inside. Christy was still locked in the bathroom, so he quickly took a shower in the main bathroom. He could feel the relaxing effect of the wine, that peaceful uplift he always felt after a couple of glasses. When he was done, he dried himself off and returned to the bedroom, a small smile on his face as he looked at his naked body. It was nice to have an empty house, he thought, briefly remembering what life was like before children. He saw his wife standing in front of the full-length bedroom mirror, adjusting her cleavage under the white cotton sundress she was wearing. It was one of his favorite dresses for several reasons, all of them selfish. Firstly, it was almost translucent and, in the right lighting, left little to the imagination. Secondly, it was very low for a sundress, highlighting her ample cleavage. Finally, it ended high above her knees, highlighting her beautiful legs. She looked as sexy as he had ever seen her. "Wow," Travis said, grateful again for this beautiful woman who agreed to spend her life with him. "You look incredible." "You too, big guy," Christy answered, laughing. At first, he did not understand her meaning. Then he followed her gaze and remembered that he was naked. He heard Christy laugh again, but she came over and kissed him softly on the lips, running her tongue along his bottom lip, pulling him back. As soon as Travis tried to grab her and pull her closer, she pushed him away and returned to the mirror. A few seconds later, they heard the doorbell ring. Travis scoffed, knowing his lustful thoughts would have to wait. He quickly put on a pair of shorts and a t-shirt and went to open the door. Travis met his friend at the house before they started the usual mutual banter about who was in uniform, etc. Alec walked downstairs to the guest room in the basement where he always stayed and threw his overnight bag inside before back upstairs and into the kitchen where Travis had a cold beer waiting. They talked briefly about how Alec's team had done in the tournament before they heard Christy come down the stairs. They both turned to see Travis' beautiful wife. She somehow looked even hotter than she had just moments ago in the bedroom, although the only change he noticed was that she had straightened her already straight hair with a flat iron. "Hello, beautiful," Alec said loudly and picked her up, hugging her tightly and long. Travis always loved how close Alec and his wife were. They seemed to form a special bond simply because they were both so important in Travis' life. Christy seemed more comfortable with Alec than with any of Travis's other friends, which wasn't surprising. Alec made everyone feel that way. Christy prepared some appetizers, which they ate while Alec drank a few beers, and Travis and Christy finished off the bottle of wine Alec had brought with him. At just after 10 p.m., they were already under the influence of several drinks and felt no pain. Laughter came easily. Most of the jokes came from some crazy adventure that Alec and Travis had gone through. All three of them understood that most of these stories had already been told several times over numerous drinks, but none of them cared. As always, Alec and Christy flirted harmlessly. This never bothered Travis. He trusted Alec as much as he trusted his wife. To be honest, he always saw it more as teasing each other, the way close brothers did, although tonight something seemed different. "How about going to the hot tub?" suggested Christy. "Let's," Alec answered without hesitation. I took my swimming trunks in case I ended up at the hotel pool. After changing into his swimsuit, Travis went downstairs and went out onto the terrace. Alec was already in the hot tub, with his arms outstretched to the sides, but Christy was not yet visible. Travis carefully sat down in the warm water and took a seat opposite his friend. They chatted about nothing for several minutes before they heard the door of the house close. They turned around to see Christy walking toward them, carrying a small cooler filled with ice and drinks. She was wearing a new white bikini that Travis had never seen before, leaving little to the imagination. Her breasts looked even bigger and more perky than usual, and when Travis finally looked away, he saw that Alec was no less mesmerized by his wife's body. "Cool suit," Alec mimicked, breaking the silence. "Do you like it?" Christy answered with a smile. "I bought it especially for you." Alec laughed. "You guys forgot your drinks." Christy smiled. "Don't worry, I'll take care of you." She set up the cooler and handed Alec and Travis fresh beer each, then opened a bottle of some colorful cocktail for herself. She stepped onto the first step of the hot tub and suddenly lost her balance. Alec jumped up to catch her. One hand was on her arm, the other was under her breast. Realizing how close his hand was to Christie's chest, Alec froze and looked at her embarrassed. "Oh, sorry," he said, removing his hand from her chest. Christie simply giggled and thanked him for saving her. Carefully entering the water, Christie sat down next to her husband, directly opposite Alec. That feels good," she sighed. She leaned her head against the edge of the pool, looking up at the stars, her full breasts seemingly trying to burst out of her tight bikini top. Travis looked at his friend and saw him struggling to look away. He took a nervous sip of his beer. "How are things going at home?" Christy asked, without taking her eyes off the stars. "Oh, same shit, different day." Both Travis and Christy knew that Alec and his wife were having problems. He had confided in Travis earlier that they hadn't had sex in almost 4 months, and he suspected she was seeing someone else. He thought he didn't care if she dated. "Well, at least you had some fun this weekend," Travis said, trying to cheer up his friend. "Glad you're here." "Yeah, it's really great to see you again," Christy agreed, still looking at the night sky. A few minutes later, Christy stood up and leaned toward Alec, reaching for something she had placed on the table by the pool. Her magnificent breasts hung just inches from Alec's face. "Sorry," she said with a smile as she sat back down, tucking the cigarette between her lips. Now Travis realized that his wife was drunk. Although Christy smoked briefly, she quit shortly after college, and Travis only saw her smoke a few times, and then only when she was very drunk. Travis once shamefully admitted to her that the thought of her smoking turned him on, although he couldn't explain why. She seemed shocked by his admission, but she had smoked a couple of times in the last couple of years after a night of drinking. "It doesn't bother you, does it, Alec?" she asked. "Not at all," he answered with a smile. "Oh, damn, can you pass me the lighter?" she said to Alec with a capricious expression. Alec looked over his shoulder and saw a lighter on the table. He handed it to her and lit it. Christy stood up and leaned towards him again, her hand resting on his shoulder. The flame finally caught up with the end of her cigarette, and she took a long drag. "Thank you," she said softly, exhaling slowly to the side. After a few seconds, she realized she was still leaning over him with her hand on his shoulder, and she finally sat down next to Travis. Wanting to relieve the tension, Travis spoke. "So what do we do next?" He regretted asking this right away, fearing that it might open some doors. "Asian," Christy thought, taking another drag on her cigarette. "What are we going to do?" Travis nervously took another long sip of his beer. It occurred to him that it had already been a long day of drinking, and the effects of the alcohol were starting to kick in more than he realized. How many drinks did he drink? A little more than usual, that's for sure. Alec, on the other hand, still seemed pretty sober. Or maybe he was just better at hiding it. "I know. Why don't we share a secret that we've never shared before? Christy suggested playfully. Let's really get to know each other. Alec laughed. Okay, I'm for it. Who will go first? Travis didn't think he'd like where this was going, but before he could say anything, Alec spoke again. Okay, I'll start. He paused, trying to think of something to say, and finally said, well, I'm not sure if this is the most intimate thing I can say, but I've been gone for almost 5 months now. Had sex. Travis was sure that this was not even close to Alec's most intimate secret. Honestly, it wasn't even a secret to Travis. He had already trusted him before. Oh my God, Christy said, seeming genuinely shocked. Poor thing. She took another drag on her cigarette and turned her head towards Travis to exhale. He made a muffled cough, and she giggled. Wanting to steer the conversation away from Alec and his lack of sex, Travis suggested they go next. He didn't really think of anything to share, but he was glad to change the subject. Okay, he slowed down. I think I like it when Christy smokes. While it may not have been his deepest or darkest confession, he thought it was a pretty important confession. Of course, Christy already knew about this, but he never shared it with anyone else. He felt a little awkward. It's not that strange, Alex said with a smile, looking at Christy. She smiled at him and then took a long, slow drag on her cigarette, meeting his gaze. Do you mean like that? She said in a soft, seductive voice, slowly exhaling in his direction. Yes, just like that. Very hot, he said, swallowing his drool. She laughed, raising her head back. You guys are dirty, she teased in a seductive voice. Travis felt jealous, but he couldn't deny that watching his wife flirt with his best friend was a certain thrill. My turn, Christy continued. Travis held his breath, desperately trying to guess what she might come up with. What is her most intimate secret? Would it be something he already knew? He suddenly realized how much it would hurt him if she shared something intimate that she hadn't told him yet. Okay, you'll probably think I'm crazy and I can't believe I'm saying this out loud. But a little over months ago, I started thinking about what it would be like to be with another man. Wow, Travis tried to look unfazed, trying to hide how offended he was. But there was no way to hide how embarrassing it was that his wife told his best friend that she was thinking about having sex with another man. Besides, it was his fantasy, not hers. Although that didn't make the confession any less awkward. Was she just playing with him, trying to get a reaction? Or did he hook her on this fantasy himself? Damn it, Christy, are you serious? This is crazy. Who would have thought? Alex said, looking really shocked. Christy leaned back and took a sip from the bottle, proud of the reaction she got from Alec. What, you didn't think I was whimsical, did you? Christy asked, pretending to be offended. No, not at all. I'm just surprised, that's all. Travis sat in silence, his face so red that he hoped it was just the hot water. He picked up his beer only to realize it was empty. What do you think about this, Travis? Are you okay with this? Asked Alec. Christy took another drag and said, Yes, honey. What do you think? Does it bother you that I fantasized about another man? Travis felt trapped and more than a little humiliated. If he says he doesn't like it, won't she tell Alec that it's his fantasy too? He didn't want to risk this additional humiliation. No, I'm sure that many married people have fantasies about other people from time to time. Everyone has fantasies, right? This doesn't mean you necessarily act on them. I think that's pretty normal, right? Travis said, feeling himself start to ramble, his nervousness and discomfort obvious. I think you're right. There's no harm, it's just a fantasy, Alec muttered, sounding a little nervous. I think it's important to have a healthy imagination. It keeps the relationship healthy, Christy added with a smile. She took another drag and tossed the remains of her cigarette onto the damp grass. She exhaled slowly, looking at Travis with a mischievous smile. His face still flushed, he tried to change the subject again. So, what time do you have to leave tomorrow, Alec? Alec paused for a few seconds, surprised by the sudden change in direction of the conversation. I should probably leave before noon. This should get me home before dinner. Travis took advantage of the moment. "Well, I think I'll go to bed," he said, getting up. "Are you ready, darling?" She was silent for a few seconds and looked at the stars again. "Yes, soon, just let me finish my drink," she replied. Travis had already climbed out of the hot tub and wrapped a towel around himself. He hesitated for a few seconds, then began to walk towards the door. "Don't be late," he said, trying to catch her eye. She didn't answer. He wondered if it was a good idea to leave them alone, especially after their recent conversation, but he reminded himself that it was just a playful chat between friends who had had too much to drink. He was sure that none of them would do anything behind his back. On his way through the kitchen, he poured a large glass of water and washed it down, hoping to minimize the inevitable headache that would surely come in the morning. He walked up the stairs to the bedroom and took off his wet swimming trunks. He lay down on the bed and began to wonder what was keeping Christy. He walked to the window and tried to look into the hot tub, but it was too dark to see anything. "Are you looking for me?" Christy said. Travis jumped up, feeling like he had been caught doing something he shouldn't have done. He turned to see Christy wrapped in a white towel, her large breasts trying to burst out. She crossed the floor and wrapped her arms around his neck, giving him a long, deep kiss. He tasted alcohol. Travis felt sudden relief. What did he expect? Why was he so nervous? Christy would never do anything they hadn't discussed beforehand. Now he was almost sure that his anxiety over the past days had been in vain. His mind finally calmed down, and he turned to the thought of the great sex that would no doubt ensue. He could admit to himself now that their conversation and Christie's behavior in the hot tub had made him extremely aroused, and he was sure that the same was affecting his wife. She finally broke their kiss and took Travis's hand, leading him down the hallway to his home office. Interesting, he thought. The office had a desk and chair, and the walls were lined with bookshelves. There was also a recliner chair and a large flat-screen TV on the wall where Travis would sometimes watch SportsCenter while taking a break from work. She pushed him into the recliner chair before leaning over him and pulling the lever that caused the chair to recline. Lying on his back, Travis stretched his legs onto the footrest. He smiled, thinking about what would no doubt come next. She walked around behind him before reaching for his wrists and pulling them over the back of the chair. A few seconds later, he heard a soft click, followed by a second one. Christy and Travis found themselves in an unusual situation in which her pegging game turned out to be much more complex and provocative than he expected. After Christy began to tie Travis to the chair, he felt a sudden sense of vulnerability mixed with anticipation of what she was planning. Christy began to behave more aggressively and forcefully, bringing their mutual friend Alec into their personal space. She turned on the security footage from their guest room, where Travis saw Alec in the same room. This situation turned out to be much more complex and stressful than Travis could have expected. He watched his wife approach Alec and soon realized that they were together, developing events that were completely contrary to his expectations. The scene was both shocking and incredibly powerful for Travis. He was forced to watch Christy interact with Alec, and this event caused him a mixture of jealousy, humiliation, but also a surprising attraction. He felt that their relationship changed greatly the moment his wife took the initiative and showed what she was capable of. When Christy returned to Travis, she decided to test his reaction. Despite all the doubts and mixed feelings, Travis still gave in to her. She knew how to manipulate his emotions, and perhaps that was what attracted him to her even more. He found himself in deep emotional conflict, trying to make sense of his feelings, which ranged from embarrassment to unexpected excitement. After everything that happened, Travis felt that their relationship would never be the same. His wife showed him a different side of their life together, and although he felt deeply conflicted about what had happened, he knew that something in their dynamic had changed forever. After a night full of unpredictable events, Travis found himself in a state of internal instability. While Christy and Alec chatted casually over morning coffee, Travis couldn't shake the memories of what had happened. The camera footage and Alec's direct involvement became a turning point that he did not expect. What was once only a fantasy had become a reality, but that reality did not bring the satisfaction he imagined. As Christy and Alex said goodbye, Travis felt his relationship with his wife coming apart at the seams. Her behavior was casual, as if nothing special had happened, but Travis was seething inside. He wondered, was it just a game, or was it something more for Christy? In the evening, Travis decided to talk. He closed the door to their bedroom and began. Christy, I have to understand. What was that? Is this part of the fantasy, or do you? He hesitated, not knowing how to formulate his fears. Did you want this yourself? Christy, surprised at first, then relaxed, as if she had been expecting this topic. Travis, I thought you wanted this. You talked about it for so long. You were so passionate about this idea. I decided, why not try? It was for our sake. But there was no complete conviction in her voice. Travis sensed that she was avoiding something important. A week has passed. Travis began to notice subtle changes in Christy's behavior. She began to stay late at work more often and spent more time on the phone. Suspicion grew, but he couldn't muster the strength to ask her directly about his concerns. One day, returning home earlier than usual, Travis found her making a call. She sat in the kitchen, her face was concentrated, but her voice was quiet and playful. When she noticed her husband, she abruptly ended the conversation. Who was it? He asked, trying to remain calm. Colleague. We were discussing tomorrow's meeting, she replied, avoiding eye contact. His inner voice screamed that she was lying, but he decided not to press. Travis's anxiety peaked a few days later when he couldn't help but look at her phone. There he found correspondence with Alec. Their conversations were playful, intimate, but what struck Travis most was that it was obvious that their connection continued beyond that night. When he confronted her about it, Christy first tried to deny it, but then admitted, Travis, I don't know how this happened. It all started as part of your fantasy. But with Alec, I felt something different. This doesn't mean I don't love you, but I can't deny that he makes me feel. Those words shattered Travis's world. He realized that his fantasy, which he thought was controllable, had opened the door to something he could no longer control. Christy was frank. Her connection with Alec was not just physical, it included emotions that threatened their marriage. Travis was faced with a choice: forgive and try to repair the relationship, or accept that their marriage would never be the same. He realized that his own desires and fantasies had become a catalyst for events that now could not be undone. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.